and I'm here with Kristen Vincent, who is the author of one of my favorite books, Speeds of Healing. And we are going to talk today a little bit about, well, whatever Kristen wants to talk about, but forgiveness, the role of forgiveness in healing is what I thought. I love that chapter. Well, I like the whole book, but I really love the chapter on forgiveness, and I thought it would be fun for us to talk about that and talk about prayer beads and all your work.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
So talk to me first about, how you got in the business of healing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good place to start.
Okay. So I came into the business of healing because of an event that happened to me when I was 7. So when I was 7, I was sexually assaulted by a stranger, and on top of that, he threatened me and said, if I was to tell anyone, he would come back and kill me and my family. And so I took that very seriously, and I just went underground with that secret of what had happened, and kind of went through my whole childhood and into young adulthood holding that secret.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I came about it, and I tried many forms of healing.
Yes.
It was only recently, as of sort of 2012 to 2014, that I actually found a process for healing that just really worked for me and led me to some really profound places. And ever since then, I have wanted to be about the work of healing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know you offer helping other trauma survivors.
Yes.
And so that's a big piece of what you do now.
It is, yeah, very much so. Yeah, I'm working with soldiers who have PTSD and meeting with them, and that's been just really profound, meaningful work that I love. And another thing that I'm doing is I'm traveling internationally, really, to different communities that have experienced widespread community-wide trauma,
right?
Such as a natural disaster or violence, and working with them on healing. And so that's been great.
I know, it's really exciting.
Yeah,
it's exciting to see all the places you're going and all that. And for me, in my work, I've done a lot with trauma and teaching trauma, and when I came across your work, I think the spiritual piece was really speaking to me, because we do a lot with the physical healing, emotional, mental,
yes,
and the spiritual part. I really didn't take that as seriously until maybe even 2012, around with my father going through cancer and dying, and these things that sort of bring it to light that this is a piece of healing that we need to do, so the spiritual piece. And so I think that's what speaks to me, and your work speaks to me, is really the spiritual part of it, and everybody can define that however they define that. But if we neglect that part, and then you may have found doing a lot of healing, you can go so far in your healing, but if we don't do the spiritual healing, which is a big piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would say in healing from any kind of pain or trauma, the goal is wholeness.
Yes.
And so we are obviously not going to reach wholeness until we've dealt with all those 4 parts that you were talking about: the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual. And I do think the spiritual piece gets missed a lot. And I think it kind of works in a lot of ways. I mean, people will certainly pray to God. Those that have faith in God will pray after a trauma or after pain. But I think that there is a lot more to it, to the healing that comes spiritually, that piece of the wholeness.
Right.
And so if people can do that, can really learn how to bring their pain to God, then I think they're really on the road to wholeness.
Right. That's what I found personally
as
well. And I know it says in your book that your passion is spiritual formation, and I'm just curious what that means to you. Like, making things. I know we make pyramids.
What's the formation
What's the
piece?
formation mean?
Good question. So, what's being formed, I think, is our sense of our understanding of God.
Okay.
So, my tagline for my company is "Be Deeply Loved."
Yes, which I love.
And that came out of my healing. I came to understand, really own that I am deeply loved by God. And I mean, I was raised in the church.
Right.
You know, I've always been in the church. So I could have told you I was loved by God, but I didn't really feel it, right? Until I was healed, you know, until I went through this healing process. And so I think for me, the spiritual formation piece is about having our spirit, our souls, finding that spirit within us.
Yes.
Reconnecting with that spirit or soul within us that's always there, that's always known that we are deeply loved by God.
Right.
Reconnecting with it. And so that's the formative piece.
Got it. Which that's my experience.
Okay.
Is that, and you know, I know sometimes in religion we talk about people being broken, and we might have some different ideas about that. For me, wholeness is what we're after. That's the kind of work that I'm wanting to do with people more now than ever.
Right.
And that's my own experience. But that wholeness, to me, people, in my experience, I don't see people as broken. It's the same, the spirit, soul, whatever. We're reconnecting. It's like you're waking up to your own soul, which has always been there.
Right.
So that part's not broken, but the pieces and the stuff we pack on in our experience feels like we're broken.
Sure. Right.
Right.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Yeah. So so the forgiveness. So I've just become increasingly aware and curious about the role of forgiveness in healing.
Yeah.
So I thought we might talk a little bit about where it's placed in your book.
Okay.
Any thoughts you have about that, but I think the placement is exactly, you could have placed it anywhere in the book.
Right.
But it is specifically placed.
It is.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Very
talk to me
intentional.
about it. Yeah, very
Okay.
intentional about that. Yeah.
So the book is based on three sort of movements that I see in the healing journey.
Yes.
The first is speaking your truth. The second is healing your spirit, and then the third is experiencing God's peace.
Right.
And that's based on my own journey and also the work that I'm seeing other people do, that first we need to be able to learn to be still with God, be present, and in that stillness, just talk honestly and openly about what happened, you know. Not because God doesn't know what happened, but because we need to be heard by God. We need to know that God is listening to us. And then from there, we begin to work with whatever's coming up from telling that story. It may be grief, anger, shame, whatever, and really working through that. And then hopefully if we have worked through those two stages, then we will begin to experience God's peace. And I feel like that is first of all about recognizing that we trust God. Because I think for so many trauma survivors, anyone who's been in pain, it would be easy to feel abandoned by God, betrayed by God. You know, maybe that God kind of let us down a bit. And so I think part of the healing is repairing that piece and realizing that we can trust God and that we do trust God. And from there, recognizing that we are loved and beginning to express gratitude. And I think it's only then that we can really get to a place of forgiveness. Now, and I, you know, I don't want to say that there's only one way, one path of healing.
Of course.
And that you have to go in these steps. Everyone's journey is different, as you know.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I just feel like it's in that place of trusting God, knowing that God loves us, really owning that, that's what opens our hearts for forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
So that's kind of why I placed it there in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know, I just think that makes sense to me in my journey too, that I couldn't do the forgiveness part, wouldn't have come until it could come.
Exactly.
And it wasn't really, I just had to forgive myself as well.
Right.
You know, in the things that have happened, all the different, from little bitty traumas to big traumas, it doesn't really matter. But for those kinds of painful experiences, there's a lot of forgiveness of self.
Yes, very much so.
It's not just forgiving other people.
Right.
And in my work, and you know, I just finished this wellness class, and we were talking a lot about forgiveness. And some people were saying, you know, I thought that it was about me forgiving other people to set them free, but it's actually to set us free. We're not forgiving the behavior and saying that was okay. What we're saying is, I free you and I free me from this experience.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think you're right that part of that is about finding forgiveness of ourselves, even when, you know, as you know, in many cases, the person didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
In my case, I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And that's true in so many cases.
Exactly.
But it's natural, I think, to feel guilty, feel like we played some role in it, we did something wrong. And so even in those cases where you didn't do anything wrong, I think it's still natural to struggle with forgiving yourself. Yeah.
And really, the forgiveness also of with forgiving yourself, but I was also thinking about, you know, it can be the things that happen subsequently, you know, not necessarily the act, but some of the anger that may have come out at other people, or some of the choices that we made.
Right.
Yeah, so there are layers
Absolutely.
to the forgiveness.
Absolutely.
That, I think.
That's exactly right.
And I don't feel like we're ever done. I mean, the healing journey is a journey.
It is.
And so I used to think that if I would meditate just enough and pray just enough, that I would reach somewhere.
Right.
There was somewhere to get.
And get your gold star.
Right. And then I realized, you know, there's nowhere to get. It's this deepening and widening. And, you know, I thought, that was not really what I was looking for. But it is my experience.
Right.
And forgiveness to me becomes when I'm ready and I can open a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more.
I think that's exactly
really,
right.
But it's powerful.
It's very powerful, and it is very freeing. I was working with a woman who came to me and said, I know I need to forgive this person, and I want to forgive this person. I just need to forgive this person. Help me do that. And the sense that I got was she felt like she needed to do it now, and then everything would be great. Right. She needed to check that off her healing to-do list. Right. And then all would be great. And what we talked about was that I don't think you can work at forgiveness, right? I think it's going to come naturally as you are sitting with God, being honest with God, and really naming what's been going on with you, naming how angry you are, how hurt you are, how ashamed you feel, really naming that with God and just letting God be with you in that pain. Because again, that's where building the trust and building the love comes in. And I think eventually forgiveness will come when it's ready, when you're ready, you know, as you've done that work and really created that space with God. I don't think it's anything that can be forced. No. You know? Right. Yeah. And I often, you know, I've heard some incredible stories of forgiveness, things that are unforgivable, and you listen to people, and their stories of forgiveness include all this gentleness with themselves. Exactly. Like it's a step forward, 2 steps back. Yes. It's not a straight path to forgiveness. It's this, I feel it today, I don't feel it now. And absolutely. Back and forth. And I think that's important because people, I think, sometimes think,
it's a one and done.
Yeah.
Like I did that, I'm done with that.
Right.
But we feel that way, you know, when we think we've worked through something and here it is again, and you're like, again?
No.
But forgiveness is the same.
Exactly.
Similar, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine, and I tell this story in the book, a friend of mine referred to the healing process as a dimmer switch.
Right.
I was really struggling because I wanted to be done with healing. Right. I wanted to be done with
reach a place.
Yeah,
done,
exactly.
check, yeah,
right. So, I don't have all the symptoms anymore, and I don't have the nightmares anymore.
Yes.
And it was one step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. And I was getting frustrated with that. And he said, you want healing to be like a light switch where you just flip it on and you're good. He said, but it's really a dimmer switch, and sometimes it goes forward and sometimes it goes back and then it'll go forward, but over time it's getting more forward and more forward, and it'll be sometimes so subtle that you won't even notice it.
It's so subtle.
Yeah. So
that has been surprising to me as well.
Right.
How subtle things can come. And it's, often just given.
Right.
Just given.
It really is.
Begging for it, praying for it, meditating over it, whatever you're doing, and then it just comes in the strangest moments where you just have a peace in your heart. It's just pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about your prayer beads and how prayer beads can help people, because I know not everyone, believes in God, and that might look. You might be fishing for somebody or some other practice for them.
Sure.
But I love the beads. I think that they help me to pay attention, turn my attention inward and pay attention to what I'm doing. And I really enjoy them. So I thought we might talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I always love talking about prayer beads.
I know. Yeah.
So my journey with prayer beads started probably about 30 years ago. I was just sort of drawn to them. And what I loved about them was that here was this object that people could hold and feel a connection to God.
Okay.
And that just sort of struck me. And that was when I didn't really that was when I was really struggling in my, healing journey. And so I think I was really yearning for that connection with God, but didn't know how to get it. And so I was just drawn to these. So I would collect them but not use them, right? And so it's only been about 9 years that I've actually been using them as part of my healing journey. And I think particularly for people who are on a healing journey, there's a number of benefits to prayer beads. I think one is that just holding them can remind us that we're not alone. They can serve as a reminder of the presence of God, the divine, the universe, the spirit, whatever the name is.
Okay.
To remind us that we're not alone, that God is as close to us as the beads are in our hand. And for times when we're just feeling in a really dark place, that can be really helpful, life-saving.
Yes.
I think also that when we're trying to be still with God, as I talked about,
right.
But our mind wanders, which everyone's mind does. That's just how our minds work. So there's no judgment about that. But I think having something physical in your hands helps you to refocus, because you'll feel that object and that'll bring you back to the present. And I really think so much of the healing journey is about being in the present moment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You get that.
I didn't want that to be true.
Right.
I did not want it to be true. I just didn't realize how true it was.
I
guess, and how hard it is to be in
the present
moment and to be still.
To be still. Well, and particularly for trauma survivors, stillness is really threatening.
Yes.
That's really hard because most of us, are always on the go trying to stay 5 steps ahead of the memories, the pain, the feelings, whatever it is. So stillness can be really threatening, and the present moment can be really threatening. But I think the gift of the present moment is that we are in a place now where we are safe. We are no longer in the past,
right,
in that moment of trauma when we really were not safe. And so staying in the present moment, I think, reminds us that we are safe, but it's in the present moment that we can really begin to just be open to God's presence with us, because God is here in the present moment with us. And so I think prayer beads can just help keep us in the present moment. You know, and I also think prayer beads kind of create a safe space, because the idea of sitting with God with your pain, I mean, all of that just sounds kind of crazy and overwhelming. It's like, really? And so I think the prayer beads can create sort of a safe space. You know, maybe if that feels overwhelming, maybe just focus on the beads until you begin to feel safe and you begin to relax, you know, and just let this be kind of your safe space for a while until you feel comfortable being still. So those are some of the things that I love about prayer beads, particularly, you know, in healing. And there's all kinds of prayer beads, you know, so there's not one type of prayer bead.
Right.
So I have a set of Protestant prayer beads, which is probably the newest prayer bead format. You know, but there's of course the Catholic rosary that a lot of people are familiar with. There are Hindu and Buddhist malas. Muslims use something called a sabha. And then in the Orthodox tradition, they use a prayer rope. So Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox Christians, they're not using beads, they are using knotted rope. But it's the same idea that you would run your fingers over the knots, much as just like you would do with beads. Yeah. So, and you know, and these are you know, kind of the major religion formats, but people make their own,
right?
You know, and they find their own symbolism. That's one of the things that I love with working with the soldiers. When I work with soldiers, I invite them to make their own set of prayer beads. And because, you know, we've got kind of all faiths in the room, you know, we've got agnostics and atheists and Jews and Buddhists and, you know, kind of everybody, you know, I just invite them to make a set that has meaning for them. And so they'll come up with their own format, their own set of colors, you know, that represents something for them. And I just think that's brilliant. And so I think people should not get too caught up in what format they're using and whether they're using that format correctly.
Right.
You know, I think it's more about finding what works for them.
Yes, which I love making the prayer beads.
Yeah.
And which brings me to your studio.
Yeah.
And your work that you do here. So you're a writer,
right?
I know that, and you're working with, and you're going all over the place to work with people and survivors and all of that. What else do you do with Prayer Work Studio?
So there's a variety of things. So I have an online shop where I sell prayer beads. I make and sell prayer beads. So part of my studio is actually a working studio where I'm making prayer beads and filling orders. But the new part that is that's sort of new for me is I now have this space that we're in, where I'm inviting people in and we're doing classes, we're doing study groups, you know, book studies. We're doing things that are bridging creativity and spirituality, which is really kind of fun. Yeah, and can also be very healing. I'm offering spiritual direction now. And then there's times when I'm outside of the studio and I'm traveling to lead a retreat or do a workshop. So that's pretty much what I do.
You get to do lots of fun stuff.
I do.
Yeah.
I love every minute of it.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Well, you're also really naturally good at all of that. Plus,
Thanks.
you know, you've had a lot of training and a lot of history to bring you to that. But that's also feels like a really good place for you to be right now.
I love it. I love my journey. I love where I am, you know, and I love what I'm able to do with it now. So I have no regrets. I mean, really can't get any better than that. So I kind of wanted to end, unless you're welcome to talk to us more about things, but you know the part that really resonated with me
when I first started talking to you and reading the book, and the part where it's really about heart work, that it's trauma is a piercing of the heart. And what I have been realizing, because I was all about the brain, and I still like the brain. The brain's a good organ to have.
Right.
But I just didn't realize how much the heart was in charge of us. And so when I started learning more about that, and really realizing that my journey was through the heart, which is, I'm still learning about that.
Sure.
But anyway, that piercing of the heart, and that what we're doing is really heart business. I thought we might have some thoughts or words about
absolutely
that.
Yeah, I love that resonated for you. It really struck me. So when I was first writing this book, just in the introduction, I wanted to talk about trauma, and so just for fun, I went to look up the word trauma.
Just for fun.
I know, just for fun.
Yeah.
And it turns out that the Latin for trauma means a piercing of the heart.
That makes sense.
And I was really struck by that because I think that really speaks to how deeply trauma can affect us.
Yes.
And no wonder why we struggle, why we have PTSD, why it takes years and years and years, and sometimes a lifetime. No wonder.
Right.
And what I hear you saying is that that the trauma, that the heart, for it to be pierced, I think that's both going to the emotional core, but also the spiritual.
Yes.
Right. So they're wrapped up in that.
And
so, what I see happening there is that that spirit, that core within us that I talked about, that has been pierced. That place that knew from the minute we were conceived that we are deeply loved by God. It's that's been pierced.
Yes.
And so then our journey is about healing so that we get back to that place where we know that we are deeply loved by God.
Right. That wholeness.
That wholeness, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's absolutely been my experience.
I know.
And that if you try to overlook that by doing lots of other healing kind of things, that you're missing a big part of it.
Exactly.
Right. It's really, this is heart business.
It is heart business. Right. Exactly. Which means so much. And you probably remember in the book where I referenced Brene Brown.
Oh yeah.
Your favorite. Yeah. So in Brene Brown, who talks about courage.
Yes.
Which is doing something from the heart. Right?
Just to tell our story with our
whole heart.
Yeah.
Yes, courage is telling our story with our whole heart.
Yes.
And how amazing that was to juxtapose that with the definition of trauma.
Which is that piercing.
That piercing.
Right.
And so if we can tell our story with our whole heart, there we go to repairing that. And so again, that goes to the speaking your truth before God, telling your whole story.
Right.
And acting courageously, because as you know, healing is tough business.
It is tough.
And it does take courage.
Yes. And I do love that. And there was something about, telling our stories to other people can be helpful, especially people who've earned the right to hear it,
yes.
a therapist.
Right.
That was helpful in some ways, but I just felt like it wasn't healing me enough. So when I read your book, and I was like, it's telling it to God and getting deep in my heart.
It's going deeper.
Not just kind of the outskirts of the heart. And I do believe that when we own our stories and we can rewrite the ending.
Absolutely.
I've seen that happen over and over, and that's why I love Brené's work.
Right.
And continue to do that work. But there's also this deeper, and that's why I love Deeply Loved. But it's a feeling.
Yes.
And it's
yes. Right.
It takes a tremendous amount of courage.
Yes,
for sure.
It does. It does. Yeah, it's a process.
I know.
Yeah.
So I've loved our time.
Yeah,
I love
me too.
your space. I love the beats. Is there anything else? How can people get in touch with you? We'll put your website.
Okay, great.
Type that.
Yep.
But is there anything else you want people to know about you or the work or any of it?
Just for fun, one of the newest thing that I'm doing
Yeah.
is love notes. So again, my whole thing is about helping people know that they are deeply loved by God.
Yes.
So my new thing is a weekly loved note that comes in your email box, and it's just short and sweet, and it's just a reminder of how to know that you are deeply loved by God. And so if people go to the website, there's a little pop-up window and they can sign up, and it's once a week, very short. But that's just been a joy to me, to just put something really good out there in the world, and to receive the response has been pretty tremendous. So,
I love that.
Yeah,
I mean,
do
that's
too.
why we're doing this, because I wanted to put some good stuff out in the world and
Exactly.
say there's wellness happening all around
Exactly.
us.
Yep.
And so to
Yep.
just make that as obvious as some of the other things.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I love your focus on wellness. I just think that is such good stuff. And I haven't ever looked this up, but wellness and wholeness, there's got to be.
There's gotta be.
Yeah.
And because that's what I meant. But when I first started, it was all about physical and mental wellness. And so I learned very quickly that it's really about the heart. We're on a heart journey here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if I would have said, yeah, sign me up. I said, sign me up for freedom. I want to live in love with my whole heart. But I had no idea, like, how messy that was going to be.
Yeah,
But,
exactly. Yeah.
you know,
It's good
I can't turn back now. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Moving
forward.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Well,
think that's great.
thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love
Thanks
it.
again. Yeah, this has been fun.